Hello everyone, in the series which we are doing on the making of contemporary India from 1950 to 1990s, we will talk about the uneven development. In the earlier lecture, we talked about the uneven development, that how after the partition of India, India was having a lot of challenges, and during that time the policy makers, those who were engaged in the making of the constitution, and the government at the center, it also realized that how the economic development of the country has to take place, and given the kind of changes in the different states, the kind of political problems which came after the independence of India, we find that over a period of time certain regions of the country they prospered, certain states they prospered at the expense of others, but in this kind of a situation, the policy makers they had this kind of a responsibility to provide equal opportunities to the states, and they even had to consider that the backward states they were to be given more opportunities in terms of providing more finances, so that they could develop and they should come at par with the other states. So the focus of the balanced development of the different regions of the country during this time was the concern of the policy makers. And the planning commission, we talked about the planning commission, that how it played an important role with regard to the overall development of the country, and at the same time the finance commissions which were appointed in different years by the President of India, and how the allocation of the kind of grant or the way the funds they will be distributed between the center and the states was the concern of the finance commission. And we find that in terms of your references or bibliography, you can refer Bipin Chandra, India after independence, Ram Guha, India after Gandhi, Pradhan H. Prasad, Roots of Uneven Regional Growth in India, Ghulam Rasool and Eklavya Sharma, Understanding the Poor Economic Performance of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, India, a Macro Perspective. So these are some of the readings when you are trying to understand the uneven development. You can refer to them for a better understanding. And when you talk about the kind of economic or the kind of economic inequality which was existing in the society, we find that how the government was trying to make the kind of efforts in terms of reducing the regional inequality during this time, and how the regional inequality which was there at different levels, we find that the picture was comparatively a mixed one. And the way the different states, as Bipin Chandra has also argued, that there has been some kind of a marginal improvement, but the regional inequality, especially in terms of per capita income, continues to remain a prominent feature of Indian economy. So Bipin Chandra has argued that during this particular period which we are trying to understand after independence, regional inequality in terms of per capita income, it remains, and that was one of the important features or the prominent features of the Indian economy. And how this kind of a disparity which was to be removed, and how in the context of the manufacturing sector, in the context of the agricultural sector, all sectors of the economy they had to contribute in that way, the primary sector, secondary sector and the tertiary sector. And after independence we find that primary sector was the most dominant sector, and the service sector or the tertiary sector did not exist to the extent the way it is contributing in the contemporary times. So we find that if we try to understand these issues in the context of the manner in which the government had to provide social welfare, and this social welfare could be seen in the framework of the life expectancy, infant mortality and literacy, that how these kind of indicators they had to be improved over a period of time. And when these indicators they will improve, then only we will find that the social welfare has been provided by the government. We also find that The increased disparity in agriculture is also gradually getting redressed through rain-fed dry areas are still lagging behind. So we find that the kind of problems which were there with regard to these issues, they have been the government is trying to take care of them in different manners and different times, and over a period of time the issue of poverty has also been in a way redressed by the government, and the people, those who were below the poverty line, they have also declined in states over a period of time during this particular period which we are talking about. But the poverty as a component of the Indian economy and the backwardness of the economy, they were there at that point of time, and we find that in terms of the advanced states that they tried to progress on that issue, and the government also made an effort so that the inter-regional disparity in the context of the distribution of poverty, that should also go away, and all the states they attain some kind of a standard of living. They also are able to remove poverty in their own particular states as well. The central government and the state government, both of them, they have to make that kind of an effort, and because of which we find that in the agricultural sector, as we talked about the green revolution and how green revolution was able to drive the economy in the agricultural sector, and some of the states they were able to produce enough so that the other regions they could also be fed, and the problems with regard to shortage of food grains in India could be redressed. And we also find that when you talk about the regional inequality in the context of the economic disparity, then why it is there on such a large scale in India, why some of the states they were performing poorly and others they were able to do in a comparative, they were in a comparatively much better situation. So one has to also understand it in the country. Constraint is not essentially of geography in that sense, but in the inequality in size or natural resources. And some of the states, when we see that some of the states like Bihar, UP and Orissa, for example, they are very well endowed by nature, and how people they are known for their industriousness, they are very, very hard working, and because of which they are welcomed in rest of the country. And many a times these people they have gone overseas as well, in West Indies, Mauritius, Fiji, wherever they have migrated, all these kind of regions. So we find that despite the issue of these people being welcomed in different parts of India as well as in different countries as well, by their own regions they could not grow at that point of time. Though the situation has improved when we are talking about the contemporary times, but once we are referring to the period of 1950s and 60s, we find that a lot of migration takes place from these regions to other parts of India. And we also find that when you will have this kind of a regional disparity, it is also because of the fact that a low rate of economic growth is also an important component. And how the rate of economic growth is to be increased, the way opportunities have to be created in these particular regions, so that people they do not go out of their own states, either for educational purposes or for employment opportunities. So educational opportunities, employment opportunities and other indicators with regard to the standard of living of people, they have to be improved, so that people they do not go out from these regions to other areas, and they contribute in those particular regions in terms of, and these regions they are also able to grow without adversely affecting the national growth as well. And we also find that when you talk about the growth of the Indian economy and how the Indian economy has improved over a period of time, then nowadays we talk about the double digit rate of growth, but even that is not even achievable. But when the economy was growing at the 7 and 8%, even that was a huge kind of a growth when you compare it to the earlier times, where we will find that India was around 3.5%. India was growing, and even in late 80s, in 1980s, we find that the rate of growth was not more than 5%. And so when you compare it from the colonial period, you will find that it was comparatively very high. But when you tend to understand that this kind of a growth which was taking place, which was even referred by some of the people, those who are associated with, from the economic understanding, that the Hindu rate of growth. So that was referred as, which was less than 5%. So we find that later the economy grew at around 7 and maybe more than 7%. So this kind of an idea where you were conveying that India could only develop at only 5% was to be negated by the people, those who were in terms of policy making, and how the economic growth or the rate of growth has to grow beyond 7 and 8%. So government is trying to make some kind of efforts in this direction, and unless the rate of growth will increase, then we will not find that the regional inequality which is there in the society will also go away, because all the states, they have to contribute in a balanced manner so that the economy develops. And we also have to see that when you are talking about the backwardness of these states, then you also have to understand the socio-economic and political organization of the states as well, and the way the agrarian structure is there in these states. And many a times in Bihar and UP, you find that it was quite regressive, as has been conveyed by Bipin Chandra. And in many parts of these states, land reforms they have been inadequately implemented. So Bipin Chandra has talked about this kind of a structure of the agrarian type, or the agrarian in the context of agriculture, and how they have to overcome the kind of problems which are there in these states, so that the land reforms which were initiated after independence, they could have become more successful, they could have been implemented in a far better manner. And we also see that when you talk about the land consolidation in some of the states, so it was not up to the mark. And on the other hand, the agricultural development of some of the states like Punjab and Haryana could take place because the land consolidation was also done in an effective manner. Then the feudal mentality in some of the regions was another problem with regard to the development of these states. And one has to also consider and see that how one has to develop the infrastructural facilities. When you are talking about the economic development, then one has to also develop the modern means of transport and communications. One has to also develop the modern markets. All sorts of agricultural facilities in terms of irrigation, etc., they are also to be given, so that developments in agriculture and industry both should take place. And the infrastructural facilities, for example, they are very, very essential for the development, and how the states, they can take some kind of an initiative or follow a proactive kind of an approach, because many of the subjects, they also fall within the state subjects. So the center and the states, they have to work in tandem, how they have to in a way help each other in terms of the development of the overall economy of the country, and at the same time the economic development of these regions as well. Ghulam Rasool and Eklavya Sharma, they have conducted a study, and in terms they talk about Bihar and UP, and they say that in Bihar and UP poor economic growth is not due to a particular factor, but an outcome of a myriad of social, economic and political factors, a number of social, economic and political factors which are rooted in structural, historical and macroeconomic policies. So they have tried to understand the poor economic growth in these regions after independence, and they do not assign that one particular factor was responsible. Rather, they try to understand in a broad manner, where they try to see them in the socio-economic and political factors, and the way the structural, historical and the macroeconomic policies, they were being in a way implied or employed in these particular states. And we also find that the economic marginalization of Bihar and UP, it began in the colonial era through the establishment of an exploited landlord class, which was resisting the economic and social development even after independence in 1947. So, the marginalization of this class has to be in a way resisted. The way the kind of the process of marginalization which was initiated during the colonial era, and how this was also being initiated by the government after independence in terms of freight equalization, which nullified the comparative advantage of Bihar and UP in the natural resources by subsidizing the railway freights of industrial inputs like coal, iron ore, steel, cement and other bulk resources. So, both of them, they have tried to understand this kind of a dynamic where these two particular states, they were not able to grow at the level of the other states which were developing, and they also argue that the low financial resources which are received from the central government during the different plan periods, they also were responsible in that sense that they undermined the capacity of these states to invest in various sectors like health, education and other social and physical infrastructures, and this resulted in the low human development. So, we find that how the central government was not able to provide the kind of resources which were required by these states, because of which these states, they were not able to grow in terms of the infrastructure which was required at that point of time. And we also find that how apart from these reasons, the social conflict which was there in terms of caste, class and ethnic divisions was another important factor in terms of low growth of these states. And we find that over a period of time, when you will spend less in terms of public health, sanitation, education, and the financial resources will be less, then it will create some kind of a cycle which will be a vicious cycle, and the low economic development and the production means that less financial resources and limited expenditure on infrastructure will take place, development planning and social services, and this low level of expenditure will definitely lead to low levels of production and therefore of financial resources. So, it is some sort of a vicious cycle where the economy will not be able to grow because low levels of investments, they are being made, and when low investments they will be there, then the infrastructure definitely will not be able to grow, and this will create this kind of a cycle where you will find that a lot of problems will crop up. Then another study by Pradhan H. Prasad, where he talks about the rate of public investment and consequently the rate of growth of production in rich states will remain higher than in poor ones, causing regional inequality to increase unless process is checked by transfer of adequate resources from rich to poor states. So, he talks about that how from the rich states to poor states more and more resources are to be given, and the Finance Commission report, it also talks about this kind of an idea, and because of this issue we find that the process of uneven regional growth takes place. Apart from that, we will find that other factors, they also bolster the backwardness, and in that context you will find the administrative and the political failure and the high levels of corruption, sheer bad administration and deteriorating law and order. So, these are other factors when you try to understand the backwardness, not only uneven development in the economic sphere, but the uneven development in other spheres as well. So one has to take care of the kind of corruption levels which are there in these states, because unless you make the administration corruption free, unless you utilize every rupee which has been given by the central government to the state, unless you create a better administration in terms of not only creating policies but at the same time implementation of those policies. So if you will have good implementation of the policies which have been made by the government, and if you are able to create a good law and order situation, then only we will expect that a balanced development will take place. And when you are getting the kind of resources, they are to be utilized in such a manner that they are able to create that kind of a development which is desirable from the money which was being invested. And we find that when you will develop the infrastructure, the roads and electricity, all of this, then the entire region will also develop, and the issue of uneven development will be taken care of. And we find that when the infrastructure and the problems which are there with regard to inefficiency and corruption are there, then the states, they will not be able to grow. So such kind of administration should be available to the publics, that they are able to provide the basic facilities to them, they are able to create that kind of an infrastructure so that the economic growth and development takes place. And how greater administrative efficiency is also very, very important, so that the states could be administered in a much better manner. We also find that there are certain kind of disparities in the development, and these disparities in terms of development, they also exist within each state as well. You will find that within a state, some regions are very, very prosperous, and on the other hand some regions are backward in nature. And even within one city, you will find that some of the regions of that particular city, some of the areas, they are highly developed, and on the other hand you will find that other areas, they have been neglected. So because of which we find that many times some movements by the states in terms of providing autonomy to certain regions, or creation of one more state within that state, they are also there. So the government also has to see in that context that disparity in the development within the state shall not be there, because this will provide some kind of a problem it will create some kind of a problem in these states. And you may also find that the states may be bifurcated because of this, and this has happened as well, that the states, they have been bifurcated by the central government on the basis of maybe administrative efficiency, or maybe the demands they have been raised by the people, those who were living in these regions. And we also find that if you will not have any kind of this feeling of discrimination among the poorer states, and so they may be poor, they may be backward, and it may be because of the political and administrative classes, but they also have to see in this context that states, they have to grow at all levels, and unless they will be given the kind of support by the central government from the economic point of view, and they also have to realize that from the social and from the administrative point of view, they have to bring a change from within. So we find that how many people, those who are living in these regions which are considered to be poorer states, they are not aware about their backwardness, and they are not aware about the poverty in comparison with the other states. So the coming of the globalization in 1990s, with the coming of the reach of the visual in the print media, TV and the newspapers, social media, and how information dissemination is taking place at all levels, and because of this information dissemination, people are getting more and more aware. They are also becoming more and more aware about their rights as well, and how all of them they can make some kind of effort to bring the kind of changes which are required at all levels. And when these people, they will be more aware about their own rights, about their own own kinds of efforts which they can put, so that they can bring about the kind of positive change which is required at all levels. And some of the viewers, some of the concerned persons with regard to the kind of work which they have done, Ajit Majumdar, he has talked about the national government needs to wield greater authority than in industrialized countries, to be able to devise and implement strategies of economic and social development, to deal with problems of regional disparities which are more acute. So he talks in this context that the way the government has to function, and he also communicates that it also must have authority to mediate and resolve conflicts between the states over the appropriation of natural resources, and to effect significant resource transfers from richer to poorer states. So these kinds of things, they have to be taken care of, and when these kinds of things they will be taken care of and the government will work in that direction, then only we will find that the overall development of the economy will definitely take place. So to sum up or to conclude, I would like to talk about the colonial period, as we talked about in the initial part of our discussion, and how because of that the government had to face a lot of challenges. And we also talked about the various reasons of the uneven development, where we talked about the economic, political, social reasons, and how the administrative and other reasons, they also played an important role in the uneven development, and the way the various states, they lagged behind when they were being compared from some other states. Their indicators, they were comparatively less, whether in terms of education, whether in terms of the economic development, or whether in terms of the standard of living. So how the efforts at the level of the states, they have to be created, how the efforts have to be made by the different states, so that they are able to overcome these kind of hurdles of uneven development, as it happened in India in 50s, 60s, and it could be seen in 70s as well, where some states they became prosperous and other states they were lagging behind. And the role of the government in terms of making some kind of policies with regard to the Planning Commission, Finance Commission, and the way they have tried to make policies so that the balanced development of all the regions can take place. So with this, I would like to end the discussion. Thank you very much.